49, but the orchestras were established under this constitution in 1952. And for basically a half a century, no one's really had to worry about their funding very much. Then suddenly, with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the complete restructuring of the German nation and economy, the western part of Germany is now having to basically rebuild the east entirely. Massive capital shifts running into the astronomical figures. I think gazillions would be the amount. And this is putting an enormous strain on the economy, which is many people are aware of internationally. And as a result, a lot of the sacred cows have come into question. One of the things is that culture is no longer a given, that it's the sacred cow you cannot even discuss. It's got to be always there. Now suddenly is at disposition. The arts, let's see, do they have to be so expensive? Can they be made more cost efficient? Or do we actually need 3 opera houses in Berlin? This sort of discussion. And the threat has resulted in the German context with a loss of, I believe, or the fusion of 40 orchestras. I believe that's the number.
40 out of how many?
Out of 150 or so. So that's a fairly huge whack.
It really is, and nothing comparable has taken place here, interestingly enough.
Not yet, maybe.
No, not yet. It's true.
We were overpopulated with orchestras. I mean, you could make that argument. And I'm saying this as an orchestral player. With the fusion of the two countries, the unification of East and West Germany, each had an enormous number of orchestras. Every tiny community had a little orchestra or an opera house or something, which is a feature of the tradition of our musical culture in Germany going back 200-300 years. But with the one government and the one nation now, you had in many cases doubles. You had East and West Berlin coming together, and they each had, there was 2 operas in one, and there was 6 orchestras, and everything was double in Berlin. One for the East and one for the West. And then when they became one city, the government was faced with a hell of a problem.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile that?
I think actually an advantage we have in America is that it's not the government's problem. And, every city of any size, including very small ones, have an orchestra of some sort. But these are private organizations, so nobody can shut them down. And if they find a way to operate, they operate. But now, are you finding that your ticket sales are declining? This is a fact in many large American orchestras.
We are, again, lucky. I wouldn't use the Berlin Philharmonic as a bellwether here, because we run at capacity all the time. I mean, we're basically sold out.
Really?
Yeah.
And is it people from Berlin buying tickets or visitors?
Also visitors.
Everybody.
We have ticket sales that you can do online at the box office and various other ways of getting them, and it's a fight. The minute midnight hits on the day of the first day of sale, we're often sold for 30 minutes.
But that is fascinating because, I'll give you 2 examples. The Cleveland Orchestra, which many people would say is our flagship orchestra in America, the people would say the best, whatever that may mean, but people will say it. And one that has achieved a great deal of support in its native city over the past generation. They are hemorrhaging sales at the box office now, and I have seen projections which show that the sales to their established ticket buyers are going down, and they have to find new people to buy tickets in order to exist. Okay, cut to New York, the New York Philharmonic, which is in a position to benefit from people who visit New York in a way that orchestras in other cities are perhaps not. And they're doing better this year than previously due to some very sharp marketing, but generally over the years recently they have been hurting. So somehow this does not happen.
Well, it sounds to me like we have some of the same advantages of New York. We're an international orchestra. We're in an international city with a huge number of people coming as tourists, cultural tourists. We can draw from all sorts of possible audiences. But that doesn't mean we're invulnerable. The traditional audience for the traditional repertoire is dying off, there's no question of that. And we've been making moves recently to try to establish channels to and contact with audiences for the future.
What are some of those?
We've started with something that we call our education or outreach project, something that a lot of people thought was inconceivable for the Berlin Philharmonic, and some actually, not members of the orchestra, some of our audience and some of the environment, the people in the society, were upset that we came down from our ivory tower, our exclusivity, and went out to work in schools in poorer parts of the city of Berlin, and doing work, more like social work, in the city. They said that's not what the Berlin Philharmonic is there for. I want my Philharmoniker to be some kind of superstar and not a social worker in the slums. we have about 60% of the orchestra now, I'd say, has now become involved. 60 to 70% are actively involved in these outreach programs. We have all developed a real passion for it. It came as a big surprise to us.
I suspect you enjoy it very much once you go and you do
fulfilling, fantastically fulfilling, and leaves you with a multifaceted sense of well-being afterwards. One, you feel as good as a mensch. Two, you see, working with young people reminds you of yourself when you were a young person. You fell in love with music, or you were first introduced to music. To see kids who have never heard of classical music, who come from a completely different culture, see the look in their eyes as they start to discover for the very first time what it tastes like. Also the issue of empowerment. We work very carefully with helping these kids discover that they are entitled to, they have the right to create something. Not just to sit there passively and learn what you're told. Sit there, be quiet and learn what you're told. But to say, who are you? I'd like to know who you are and what you can do. And show me, and how can I help you make something happen musically? Improvisation workshops and composition workshops and things like that. For kids who've never done music. Never held an instrument in their hands, don't know what Beethoven is, classical music. They don't even know the name classical music. And we've brought them into the Philharmonic. You know, and whether they turn around in 20 or 30 years and buy a ticket, we do not know. But we certainly feel that we are in touch with our community to a degree and extent we have never been before. And that has to be good. And
you really don't know where things like that are going to go. It really is not a straight line. You nourish these kids musically and later on they buy tickets.
Have we got time for this? Because this is a really big subject. It's a big subject which I think affects all American orchestras. Put briefly, we have contact with, we've been working in Venezuela with the Venezuelan Youth Project, Youth Orchestra Music Project, which is 30 years old and predates Chavez and all the other presidents. It goes way back. They've been phenomenally successful, unbelievably successful. 250,000 children every year are involved in this program and are basically taken off the streets. These are street kids, you know. They're taken out of crime and out of drug use and out of family abuse, and they're taken out of the slums. They're given musical instruments, stuck in a little orchestra, and encouraged just to live together with their fellow kids. Kids there normally are frightened and afraid of. So the poverty cycle, the crime, and the fear cycle are broken through by the use of classical, Western, symphony orchestra music. This project is something we're all beginning to learn from. We're using the techniques in Berlin. There will soon be a project in Scotland doing the same thing. People are copying all over the place. The New England Conservatory is now involved down there. And if American orchestras and their boards would like to try something, I would highly recommend this. The idea of going and doing school concerts, not so much to try and win audiences for the future, or to look good to your sponsors in order to raise money that way, as an image issue, but frankly, to be one of the most powerful social engineering projects you could possibly find. The most effective one I've ever seen on the planet. And it's done by the only people who can do it. The only ones who can do it are symphony orchestra players. We should make a note that this is an entirely separate discussion. That with you or somebody should be the subject of one of these interviews by itself, because it really is profound. And I would like to suggest, my theory anyway, that if you ask what the benefit is to the orchestra, it's wrong to look at it as a linear thing. Oh, if we do this, it will then translate in a way that we understand into more ticket sales in the future. What it does is begin to transform the kind of institution that an orchestra is and what its relationship is to the society around it in ways whose result cannot be foreseen, but may build, certainly going to be, something that builds the kind of future we would all like to see. And we don't know what that is. That's, as I said, it's a huge subject, and it's vital that it be addressed, and this is perhaps not the right venue for it, but it's a subject that this venue should address. Thank you very much, Fergus. I get the feeling that we only scratched the surface of many things, and that if we had the chance to go on for another 3 hours, there's no telling what might come up. There's no end to it. Thank you for having me.